Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Walden Wong Art. Today we're going to be doing an art review and critique. For those of you who landed on my channel and you don't know who I am, my name is Walden Wong. I'm a comic book artist for Marvel and DC Comics. Check out my website, it's waldenwongart.com. And if you enjoy these videos, please check out my Patreon. My Patreon is patreon.com/waldenwongart. If you go there, there's different tiers that you can look at, so check that out. So one of my patrons, his name is Jason, and he did some artwork over penciler Ryan Ottley. So this is his inks, and I'm going to be reviewing it, so hopefully you'll be able to learn from it as well. So without further ado, here we go. Alright, so this is the inks that that Jason did, but before we look at the ink, let's take a look at the pencils. So right over here, here's the pencils. Okay, Ryan Ottley, he's one of the artists that worked on The Invincible. So some of you may know his work. Okay, and then he started working on Spider-Man. So here's Ryan Ottley's pencils right over here. We're gonna go and look at the top. Okay, so it looks like it's for Amazing Spider-Man issue 12, page 1, Ryan Ottley. And then now let's take a look at Jason's inks on top of this. Okay, so here's the inks. Okay, so as an inker, usually what I do look at is I look at if the artwork is popping forward, middle ground, background, foreground, if lines are tapered nicely, if there's good line weights, make sure the line weights are done correctly. So we're gonna take a look, okay? So right away, I'm gonna grab the red marker so we can see what I'm marking. Here's the red, and I'm gonna make my little markings just a little bit smaller. So there we go. So right here, some of these lines, they're a little bit shaky, and then they're almost like disappearing. So like if you look at some of the lines over here, look at Spider-Man's webbing lines, they're much darker, but these ones, they're a little bit lighter. Try to get a little bit more ink in there. If you're using a quill, dip it, or using a brush, dip it again. And then we're gonna look at some of the line weights. First, we're gonna talk about line weights. Make sure everything is in the right place. Okay, so here's the pencils. And then Spider-Man's in the foreground, so what we want is to have Spider-Man to have a really thick outline. So we're going to take a look at the outlines. So the outline here is pretty good. And the head outline's pretty good. A little bit wobbly, Jason. So let's try to get that a little bit better. We're going to take a look at some more. I do like the way you have Spider-Man line weight a little bit thicker than the rest of everyone else, so that's a good thing. Middle ground, let's see if the middle ground is a little bit thicker than the background. Okay, so right here we have middle ground that's thicker than the background stuff, which is okay. Some of the background stuff is just all like a solid black, so you don't really need to worry about line weights over there, unless there's a cross that goes outside and it goes over another character. So it's good that you did this a little bit thicker than the backgrounds over here. Okay, some of the interior lines, they're a little bit scratchy. So in this case, I don't know if it's because when you scanned it at a lower resolution. When you're scanning artwork, the best way to scan artwork is to scan it at 600 dpi. At full size, and then when you're saving it and you're sending it out to like editors or publishers or like to anyone, get that 600 dpi and then reduce it to a smaller size, say 160 dpi. That way you'll capture all the resolution, the line work, and then you don't lose any of that and it doesn't get pixelated. Okay, again, so keep that in mind. Scan at 600 dpi. And then you can reduce it later. I remember when I first started working in comics, I'm thinking, why don't I just scan at 160 dpi? Why waste the time scanning higher, you know, having the scanner take longer to scan and then bumping it down? Because if you scan at a lower resolution, it's gonna scan quicker, but it's not gonna pick up all the line work. But if you scan at a higher resolution, it picks up all the line work, and then it will save all the details when you bump it back down. Okay, so we're gonna look at some of the areas over here, like this line weight on this head. This is a good line weight over here, but over here you should also thicken up some of the beard over here. So just make sure that's thicker. You want to keep, so when you have foreground, middle ground, and background, you also want to keep the objects. Like for example, if I'm looking at a character's head, I see that as the foreground of that character. Okay, the hands as the foreground of that character. Okay, so here you want to keep this a little bit thicker. Okay, even though these are interior lines, you still need to think of the object of that anatomy, okay? We're gonna take a look at some of the other lines. So I would say try to get your lines a little bit smoother. When you're inking lines, I mean, I do like the way you have your line thickness, but I would like you, so some areas I can see that you're able to create a nice smooth line. But to create a smooth line, regardless if you're inking traditionally with a brush, with a quill, with a micron, that technique is to actually go quickly, to draw that line quickly. The slower you draw that line, the more wobbly it is, okay? So the best way to do a quick line is to rotate your page to where it's comfortable for your right hand or left hand to ink that line, and then just quickly ink that line as quick as you can, okay? Now when you're inking, your objective in inking is to have a nice move line. So if you're inking over pencils and it's slightly off from the pencil, it's still okay. Don't white it out. As long as it's close to the pencil, then you're gonna have a nice move line, okay? Okay, so the foreground, middle ground, background is pretty good. Now I'm going to talk about the next thing that I look at a lot, and that is taper lines. So let me explain what taper lines are. Taper lines is when you have a sharp line and it goes thicker like this. So you start with a sharp line and it goes thick, sharp line goes thick. What this does is it creates a gradation from a black area into a light area, okay? So if I was inking this in black, I'm gonna find an area, okay? If I was inking this in black, so what I'll do is I'll go up for, let's go on this wing over here. So I'll go thin and thick, thin and thick, thin and thick, thin and thick. You want those taper lines to close up, okay? Close up into a little triangular tip like right in over here. So you want the lines to be sharp as you start it, and then open up, sharp as you start it, and then it closes up over here. Sharp, and it closes up. And again, you see how I'm doing this slowly? When I'm doing this slowly, it's a little bit shaky, but if I go quickly, you're gonna have a nice smoother line, okay? Now, if you're inking this digitally, some of you are digital artists, try not to zoom way in there, okay? Because if you zoom way in there, you're not gonna get a sharp line. But if you ink like at this distance, and you know, it'll look sharp, okay? When you're inking really close digitally, you're gonna end up spending so much more time inking stuff, okay? It's just gonna take you so much longer to finish the page, okay? So we do need you, Jason, to go in here and fix up some of the taper lines. I know we're gonna take a look at Ryan's pencils. Okay, so Ryan's pencils are, we're gonna take a look at this area. Ryan's pencils, he has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 8, 9. And then you're following his lines, which is pretty good. And if you're a starting inker, it's good to follow the lines exactly the way it is. So let's take a look at the knees over here. This one kind of looks like it's all over the place. We're gonna take a look at the pencils. Okay, so the pencils right over here, they have these lines going this direction, vertically up and down, and then there's some lines that are off. Now, I can tell you that when you're working with a penciler, sometimes the penciler is working on a deadline, and instead of them drawing everything in there really nicely, especially with hatch lines and cross hatch lines, they indicate it, and then your job is go in there and to make it a little bit better. So I'm gonna rotate this and show you how I would make it better. Okay, I'm gonna use red color on top of your inks. So here, I'll start off thin, and I'll close up, and I'll make it thicker. I'll go like this, go like this. Now try to close them up, and now try to keep it consistent, and I'll go all the way down. Now, sometimes if you're inking a line, it doesn't connect to that sharp point, that negative space. I would just go back in there, and I'll just kind of like shave it in there, and I'll fill it in like that. So this way you have a consistent sharp tip that goes from here to here, okay? So I'll do all that like this, and I'll go in there and I'll fill it in. I'll ink one line, I'll fill it in. The only reason I'm doing this is because I'm using a pin, a graphics pin, and if I'm using a brush, I can press down harder, and then your brush will become thicker, and you can ink that line a little bit smoother, okay? But if you're using a quill, or if you're using a graphics tablet, you can make your line, if you're doing a graphics tablet, you can make your line a little bit thicker, like adjust the thickness of your brush, and then just press down. Make sure you have a pressure sensitive graphics tablet. Okay, after I have that, then I'll rotate it. And then here's the part that you can make like a nice gradation, okay? Instead of having same thickness lines, the best way to do this, and this is a nice secret, this is a great tip for a lot of you, pay attention. So what I would do is I would start lightly, and then as I go into the black, I'll start pressing down, and I'll press down harder, and I'll start easing up to a lighter area. So in a way, you're going from thin to thick to thin, okay? So, and then as you're going into the black area, your line is gonna get thicker and thicker. Okay. Not only that, you're closing up those lines. You know, those tic-tac-toe boxes in between, it's gonna get smaller and smaller, and then I'll cover all that up. So now if you look in here, if you look at, I'm gonna grab another color so you guys can see what I'm pointing at. If you look at this box over here, let's just say this box right here, you see this square? It starts out large and they're all consistently that same size, but as I go into it, they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, okay? This creates a gradation of a light tone to a medium value to a dark value. So that's one thing that you wanna focus on. And then when you're doing the cross hatching and then you're not going into a black area, what you want to do is when you want to start thin, press down and then ease up to get that thin line. We call these daggers. And when you're inking and you're doing like thin to thick to thin, those are called daggers. Okay, so thin to thick to thin. It's almost like a little dagger, like speed lines. Like say Electra is throwing like her daggers, and then you're inking that effect, like that swoosh effect. That's what you're trying to do. So if you want to practice inking daggers, that's the best way. Just go thin, thick, thin, thin, thick, thin. It's the best way I can describe it is like skipping rocks over a lake. You want to throw it where the rock lightly hits the water, and it just pops right up, and then it just goes right off. So that's the best way that when you're inking to do that. Okay, now we're gonna take a look at these taper lines over here. You see these taper lines? You have these big triangles here. And then once you get to the bottom, you're gonna have like thin lines. I wouldn't do that. When I'm inking, what I would do is I would make those lines consistent, okay? So sometimes it's easier to just adjust it a little bit. So I'm gonna make my brush a little bit larger. I'll start thin. Let me just do it over here. I'll start thin, I'll press down, thin, press down, thin, press down. Now as I get to the bottom area, I'll start breaking it up like that. Now if you look here, you notice that these lines are thicker, okay, and then as it goes further to the outlines, like the lines over here, they start thinning out, and then the lines goes thinner and thinner. So what you want to do is make these a little bit thicker here, and then thin out, okay? Okay, let's take a look at some of the other areas. So Jason, I would say your line weights are pretty good right now, but I do want you to focus on tapering and cross hatching lines. Like this, like the taper lines go in this direction, that's done really nicely. However, these lines go in this direction, they're kind of off, okay? Let's take a look at the pencils, see how Ryan Oley did it. So it's like this. And then now what I would do is, I'm gonna ink this way. So what I would do is, you see how this line goes thin and thick? When I'm doing it this way, I wanna match that perpendicular line to the original line, to the same thickness, okay? So that's what you want to do. So right here, we're gonna go like this, start thin, and then go thicker as you go into it, and then press down harder with your brush or a quill, and then close them up a little bit closer. So you're gonna get a consistent line. I'm gonna ink a few of them, so those of you who are watching this, so it doesn't get too confusing, I'm gonna go thin to thick like this. This is one direction, okay? I wanna do this a little bit quicker. Okay, and then I'll rotate my canvas, I'll rotate my Bristol board, and I'll zoom in there, and then I'll go in there and make sure I can move my hand in the right direction. If not, I'll rotate it with my left hand. And then now I'll start thin. And then as I get into the black area, look at those little squares or those little diamonds. I'll start pressing down. I'll start pressing down on it, and then I'll get them a little bit closer to each other. So those rectangles and those diamonds, they'll get smaller and smaller until it goes to a black area. See that? That is a nice gradation tone, okay? We'll do that again. So those of you, what you can do is you can grab a little scratch paper and then practice along with me. So we'll ink lines going into the black area. So we're gonna rotate it like this way. Just start thin, almost like you're landing an airplane. You're starting thin and you're landing into the tarmac. And then once you land, the wheels are gonna be more like flat onto the ground. Once you have that, you're gonna rotate again. Rotate it like this. Okay, you're gonna make a ghost line. Ghost line is when you're making a line without actually putting pencil to paper. And then now, once you have that, you're gonna get that gradation tone. Again, I'm gonna do it the wrong way so you can see how the wrong way looks. That does not look good. Now, the best way is start thin and then press into it, make it thicker and make it closer. Okay, have those lines a little bit thicker and closer until you have a nice gradation. See that? It's a nice gray tone, regardless if you're going in this direction or the other direction, okay? So I'm gonna do a few of them on this arm over here. So we're gonna go like this, okay? We're gonna just hatch it in. Sometimes when you're doing a cross hatch, you don't really need to worry about closing them up, because when you're cross hatching it, you'll be closing it up, okay? So, and then I'll rotate it. After rotating it, I'll do a ghost line. I'll go like this. I go thin. Actually, let me rotate it again to the right direction. Okay, I'll go thin, and then I'll go thicker. And as I go into the black, I'll press really thick, and each line following is gonna be a little bit closer to the other line until it becomes black. See that gradation? It's a nice clean gradation. So those are one thing to look for, okay? And you see how some of these gradations that you have here in this crosshatch, some of these little rectangles, you see these little rectangles that you're doing, they look nice, but then up here it's missing it. It just disappears. You want to keep those little rectangles or diamond shape kind of more consistent. So the line weight you have here, Jason, is pretty good. I think you're doing good line weights, especially like this line right here is like really smooth. Your foreground, middle ground, background is pretty good. Focus on making sure your ink lines are darker. So if you're inking with a micron that's not really dark and it's kind of grayish a little bit, what you can do is you can use Photoshop after you scan it. Like for example, this is scanned, and then what I'll do is I can circle the area like this in Photoshop, and then you can just go over here, go to image, adjustment, and then levels like this, and then you can just darken it up like this. See this? So if it's a little bit kind of grayish, just kind of do that. The other option is to go over here and use the your burn tool. This is your burn tool. There's a burn tool and dodge tool. Dodge is to make it lighter, burn is to make it darker. So I just take the burn tool, which is a little hand that goes like this, and then just go over and just go on top, scrub it a little bit. See, it's kind of like light. I'll just scrub it, and then, whoops, let me get the burn tool out, let me go backwards, and I just scrub it, and it'll just make that line a little bit darker. It was kind of grayish. That's what I usually do on a lot of the areas that that needs to be darker. Like for example, some of the, you see a tail right here, that needs to be darker. I just do some post-production work, and then I'll just go in there and just, you know, just go and darken it up. You're not actually inking anything, you're just making the blacks more darker. Okay, so yeah, okay, so one thing I also like to do is when I'm making like lines that has like these little lines across, what I like to do is I like to add a little bit of a white line over here. So for example, like these hatch lines that you inked over here, I like going over there and using white and kind of like white it out a little bit. So let's use the brush and here and get my line, and then just kind of white it out so it has that separation of that part of this, so it makes it look like it's metal. I think it just looks nice. That's like a fun little inking tip. You can use a gel pen. Like for example, one of the gel pens that I like using are these Jelly Roll right over here. This is a Jelly Roll. These make like a nice white, opaque white. Okay, so try thinking about using that. Let's see some of the other lines. Yeah, so Jason, I would recommend working on the speed of your lines. Like some of these, you see this black line over here? Let's take a look at the pencils. Yeah, you see right here, when Ryan Ottley penciled this, he had this line like really smooth, but then there's a little bit of shakiness, okay? Now, I don't know if you're inking your comic book page like vertically and you're not like rotating it. When I'm inking, I'm constantly rotating the page with my hand. The reason I'm rotating the page because when I'm inking a line, I can get a much smoother line. So for example, if I'm inking this line, I would just go like this and go just and then fill in between. Now, if I was gonna ink a page and then I'm not rotating it and I need to ink that line going this way, what's happening is I'm using my wrist and my elbow. You're moving two joints on your arm. When you're moving two joints, there's a chance of it wobbling a little bit. But if you're using one joint like your wrist, or if you're using your elbow, or just your finger one at a time, you're gonna get a nice smooth arc. That works kind of like a compass. So make sure your line's a little bit smoother. And then to help that become more smoother is to rotate the page. After rotating the page, you're gonna let's look at Ryan's line. You see how Ryan's lines are like smooth over here? And then the ink lines are a little bit wobbly. So I'll take my left hand, I'll move it to the right position, and then I'll do a ghost line. A ghost line is when I'm making that motion on top of the Bristol board without inking. And then once I have that, then I'll ink the line to get that nice, crisp, clean line, okay? And when you're inking, make sure you don't have lines like going out that doesn't belong over there, okay? Artwork, every line that you put down is important, okay? There's no line that's an accidental line. Every line should be just as important, okay? So some of the scorpion, as I mentioned earlier, I would use a white line to just cut into there and then just cut into there. It's just something that makes it look a little bit cooler like this. So here's a white line, just put that in there. Just cut through, maybe even cut through a little bit over here. And then later on, I'm gonna zoom back out so you can see how cool that looks. See, that is just a little bit of a inking technique that you can make that look a little bit cooler. Maybe there should have been another line here, and I would just go in there with the white line, just add another one over there. See, there's just more details, okay? So let's take a look at Scorpion the way it was before, without the white lines. See, it's just a solid black, and then with it, it just looks a little bit cooler. Let's see if Ryan left. So Ryan didn't leave that there. Usually when I'm making comic books, I like adding that little bit of details just because it looks a little bit cooler. Okay, Spider-Man's done really nicely. Just be careful with some of these extra bumps and stuff, okay? Okay, good. Yeah, so Jason, what I would recommend is pretty good. Jason's been following me on my Patreon, and this is like, I think his second or third art review and critique, and then from the first review he learned a lot. He's doing it with the brush. But I would focus on the speed of your lines that you're inking down, and also focus on the cross-hatching lines, taper lines and cross-hatching lines. Do those quickly, ink those quickly. You can get a scratch paper, just practice inking some of the speed lines and some of the taper lines, and like from a point A. So practice, look at a point where you can start a line and then where you can end a line. Just practice drawing lines to see if you can get there, okay? Because when I ink, I look at where the line is gonna start. I'll look at where the line is starting and where the line is ending. And then when I'm inking, I don't look at the tip of my brush or the quill to see where it goes. My eyes is looking at where it starts, and then my eye is looking at where it ends, and then I'll do a ghost line. And then when you're drawing that line, your hand, you'll be surprised, your hand will automatically get to that point as fast as you can. You can do that over and over again. It's like driving a car. When you're driving a car, you're looking at the front of the road. You're looking at your destination. You're not looking at the road in front of you. If you look at the road in front of you, you're not looking at the front, your car is going to be swerving. Okay, so think of that as you're inking, okay? So that is Jason's artwork over Ryan Ottley's pencils right over here. And there you have it. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this art review and critique over one of my Patreon, Jason's work. Jason's doing pretty well. He's doing very good. So if you're interested in being one of my Patrons, check out my Patreon page. It's patreon.com/WaldenWongArt, and there's different tiers that you can join if you want to have me mentor some of your work. You can also show support, like for these videos that I make for you. So thank you very much for that. Okay. You can also check out more of my work. I'm a comic book artist from Marvel, DC, and you can see my website on WaldenWongArt.com. So keep on drawing, keep on inking. The more you practice, the better you get at it. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.